how do we go from the script, from our analysis, to the lighting plot, that documentation that we need going into the theater? Well, this is the process that we're going to go through step by step for My Fair Lady. So these are the major steps. One, develop images in your head and on paper for each scene or environment. So that's based on our production analysis. That's based on that analytical synopsis. All the things that we did with, looking at doing image research and analyzing the script and the story. It's all so that we could develop images in our head, or on paper, or in the computer, whatever, to come up with those images, what we want each scene to look like. So the second step is to create a lighting key for each scene, and I'll talk about what that actually is. And then we're going to take those lighting keys and we're going to expand it to the entire stage. So a lighting key is something that tells us how to light a single person. And then we're going to take that and we're going to expand it to the entire stage. So we're going to go from something that tells us how to light a single person to something that tells us how to light the entire stage. And we're going to light the entire stage using systems of lights. Okay. Once we do that, we're going to add in lights for other purposes, specials, practicals, washes, effects. We'll talk about what all those things are. And then we're going to optimize. So based on the limitations of the production, the theater, whatever it might be, whatever the limitations are, we need to optimize based on those. So let's start. We're going to start here at this idea of the lighting key, because we already talked about developing the image in your head, about analyzing the script, doing that analytical synopsis, figuring out what you want it to look like. That's the image. So now we're going to talk about what a lighting key is. Okay, so lighting keys summarize the direction, intensity, and color of lights used to create a particular image for a particular moment or scene in the production. So it is a drawing or a graphic that shows us the directions, intensities, and colors of lights used to create an image, one of those images in our head. Okay, so here are two lighting keys for My Fair Lady. This is for the Wimpole Street sunset, and this is for the study, Higgins study, during the day. And you can see what's going on here. We've got, it shows the direction of the light, where the light is coming from. This is coming from, what would be stage right at, like a 45-degree angle or so. It says the color, R36 is pink, and it has the intensity, 25%, roughly. And then over here, another light, 368, this is a light blue, 40%. And the purpose of these intensities is so we have an idea what the relative intensities are. Well, the blue is, more intense than the pink. That's what's important. Here's a wash from the front. So that's just, this is an acting area light, this is an acting area light, and this is a wash of color into that acting area. This is an acting area. That's, where one single person would be standing. From this position here is from the side and above the stage. So R63 is another light blue. This is a backlight. R74 is a dark blue. So you get an idea how this little graphic here shows us how we're going to create a particular image. Same thing with the study here. R55 from this direction at this intensity, that's a lavender. This is a blue, this direction, this intensity. Two different colors in the side lights, a different color in the backlight. So basically what we're doing is we're going through the different scenes and creating a lighting key for each scene. Remember what we mentioned about how do you learn how to design? one aspect of that was the light lab. And lighting keys are a major part of the decision making, and they're created in the light lab. If they're created in the light lab, that means they can be, you can create them entirely in your head. You can actually do them on paper like this. You can figure them out in the computer. You can, or you can figure them out with real lights. So there are tons of shows. Actually, My Fair Lady is the first show that I have ever done a real lighting key like this, and done my, figuring things out based on actual lighting keys for every scene. So it's not something that you actually need to do, but if you don't actually draw these, you are still figuring it out in your head some way. You're still doing that same processing in your head or through some other method. So how did I actually do it for My Fair Lady? Well, I used actual my own light lab, an actual setup of real lights. So these are just clip lights that I purchased, and I made this dimmer box, and I've connected, 5 or 6 different lights here, and shine them on a target. And these are different positions. So I've got a backlight, a side light, and front lights. And I also purchased a set of gel, a set of color filters to experiment with. So I've got the dimmer box to experiment with intensity. I've got different color filters to experiment with color. And then by doing that, you come up with different, different looks on the target, and that's how I developed lighting keys for the show. So the next step, once I went through and did all that experimentation for each scene, was to revise the lighting keys I came up with. So this is a summary of the lighting keys I came up with for the different scenes. The Covent Garden and the tenement at night, for specifically for a particular song, Wimpole Street Sunset, Wimpole Street at night, the ballroom scene, and front lights, side lights, and back lights. And these are the different colors and their intensities. So first thing you notice here, I've got a lot of colors here. I've got 351, 376, 83, 331, 368, 36. That's a lot of different colors. So what I needed to do is figure out how I can reduce some of those, because I have to know what my limitations are in the theater I'm working in. I can't have that many different color washes over the whole stage. I just don't have enough lights to do that, enough circuits and lights to do that. So I had to go through and do some revision. So here is the ballroom lighting key, and it's been revised. It no longer utilizes 351 as a front light. So I created a similar effect that I was happy with, without using that particular color, with using colors that I was using elsewhere. So it gives you an idea about how how this process takes place of coming up with keys, and then you have to compare them to each other, because I can't afford to have 15 different lighting keys for the whole lighting plot. I can't have 15 different lighting plots. I have to consolidate and create the looks that I want with a certain number of lights, with a certain quantity of lights. So that's what I was doing here. I'm revising my lighting keys so that I don't have too many different colors, so that I don't need too many different lights. So the next step, like I said, this is the lights used to light one particular acting area, to light one person. So the next step is to scale this up to the whole stage. How do we light the whole stage this way? And the way we do that is by scaling up to the whole stage. So here are the things we need to consider when we scale up to the whole stage. We need to be thinking about the size of the stage and the design of the theater. Bigger stage, you're going to need more lights. If you want to light the whole stage according to that lighting key, if it's really big, you're going to need lots of lights to do it. If it's a smaller stage, less lights. Design of the theater, we're talking about proscenium theater. If it were an in the round where the audience sits around the stage, that would require a different lighting arrangement. Sight lines from the audience, available lighting positions. I have to be able to put lights where where my lighting keys are telling me I need to put lights. Equipment inventory. If I don't have enough of the lights I need, that's going to be a problem. So I need to be thinking about that. Quantity and layout of the lighting circuits. That's going to affect whether I can get things plugged in where I need them to be plugged in, whether I can circuit lights the way I want to circuit them. If I don't have enough, if I don't have enough, then I'm going to have to connect things together. If the layout is poor, then I'm going to have to use a lot of cable to plug things in where they need to be plugged in. Accessibility of lights for focusing. That could be a problem, because if they're not accessible, it means it's going to take longer to do things, and it could be more dangerous to do things. So, there's a consequence to putting lights places. Just because it's the best design decision doesn't mean it's really the best thing to do, because if that position you're putting them in is really difficult to get to, even dangerous to get to, it may not be worth doing it. You might want to try something else. Interference with other production aspects. Do you know what the production schedule is for everybody else involved in the show? Rehearsal schedule, set schedule, all that sort of thing can affect can affect what you end up doing design-wise. If you don't have a lot of time to execute a design, or you're going to be sharing the stage with someone while you're doing it, you might change certain things to make it easier. Crew size and installation time. That comes back to schedule and how much help do you have? Do you have the resources that you need? Relative importance of each scene. That's a big one, especially for a musical like My Fair Lady, because there are lots of scenes. So how important is each scene? How much of the total show does that scene constitute? Does it make sense to have an entire lighting plot, or 50 lights for a scene that might be important in the story but is only a very short time in the show? So, for example, in My Fair Lady, the garden scene is right near the end of the show. That's an important scene, but it doesn't. If you don't have enough lighting positions, enough lights and things like that, you're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to afford to do a lot with that one scene, just because it's such a small portion of the show. So, and that really comes back to all these other things. It depends on how many lighting positions you have, where they are, how much lighting equipment you have, all that sort of thing. You might be able to afford to do it if you have enough lights and resources, but you might not be able to. So you have to consider how important each scene is compared to all the other scenes in the show. All right, some generally accepted rules. We don't generally dedicate lights specifically to the scenery, unless it's for some special purpose, for a backdrop or an effect or something like that. We don't put in lights for the actors and then add more for the walls of the scenery or things like that, because in general, almost all the time, the light bouncing off the floor and bouncing off other things is enough to bleed right onto all the scenery and light it pretty much perfectly. So only in special circumstances do you need to put things in specifically to light just scenery. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing, lightly tinted colors, unsaturated colors, are used to light the faces of the actors to achieve function of visibility. So we use lightly tinted colors in the front lights for the acting areas. This is less important in dance because we're not as worried about the face. We're worried about the entire body. But in a play or a musical, we need to make sure that we're lighting the faces. We need to make sure that the actors are visible, so we're not going to use really saturated colors in the front lights for the actors. We might still put saturated colors from the front, but they're going to be in washes of light. So highly tinted colors, the saturated colors, are going to be in washes of light. They're not generally going to be used as the primary source of light. They'll be used to color tone the whole stage. They'll be used for modeling lights and for effects. So those are just some generally accepted rules to keep in mind. Okay, so you might be wondering how we actually scale up from the lighting keys, and we do that by building the lighting plot. It's that piece of documentation that we talked about in section 1. It's the drawing that shows you where all the lights go. So we can build that by drafting it by hand, drawing something by hand, or we can do it in the computer using, in this case, we're going to use this program called VectorWorks Spotlight. So this is what the program looks like, and what we're going to actually do is I'm going to take you into VectorWorks and I'll show you what it looks like in VectorWorks. So this is VectorWorks, and what we're looking at here is our electrics layer. So I'm looking at the layer of my drawing that has all the lights on it, and if we zoom in here on some of the lights, you can see what the symbols actually look like. So, this symbol is for a Fresnel, this symbol is for a par, this symbol is for an ellipsoidal. The different labels, this is the channel number, dimmer number, unit number, color, and the purpose. So STDL is a lavender light for the study. So how do I actually add a light to the light plot? Well, I would come up here to my resource browser, I would pick which symbol I wanted, and then I'd come over to my tools here, my instrument insertion tool, and I would just click where I want the light to be. I could rotate it, I could do other things to it, and then up here in object info I just type in all the information about the light. So to build the light plot, I would either do it this way in VectorWorks, pasting my symbols in and filling in the information, or I could draw it by hand. Either way works. So how do I know where to actually put those lights? Well, one thing that is nice about VectorWorks is it's integrated set and lighting. So for example, if I come over here and show you the whole set model is actually in the computer in addition to the lights. So this is the Covent Garden scene, and I can actually show you it in 3D. That is Covent Garden in 3D. We can look at it, from any angle we want. And what's good about this is I can produce the renderings that you saw earlier, or what I can do is I can look at it in that downward view. And so let's go back to our lights, and I come over here to my layers and I say, okay, I want to see the scenery underneath that. So there's the study scenery underneath that. I want to see the auditorium underneath that. Okay, so as I'm building the light plot in the computer, I can see where the scenery is in relationship to the lights. So if I'm trying to, put in a light for the couch, I can get an idea about where it should go. Well, it should go back here somewhere because the couch is right there. So it allows me to visualize things very easily by having both the scenery and the lighting in the computer in the same program together. Okay, so let's go back to PowerPoint. The question now is, how do I know what lights to put where? Well, that goes back to the lighting keys. So when I'm creating the lighting plot, I'm again thinking about those lighting keys and how they relate to each other. I have to know how one lighting key is going to affect the other, how one lighting key depends on the other. And I have to know that, like I said, as you're creating the lighting keys, because you can't have 15 lighting keys that are radically different from each other, that don't, some of them have to use some of the same elements as the others. Otherwise, you're going to end up needing so many lights to do your show, it's going to become ridiculous. So you need to know how they affect each other, how they depend on each other. So on this slide here I am creating the lighting plot for the front of house. These two positions here are the front of house positions. And if we look at the lighting key here, this right here is just a zoomed in portion of this, since this is so small. So if you look at this lighting key, we see, let's see here, in this lighting key there's a R36, that's a pink front light, and over here on the lighting plot I've put in an R36 pink front light. And now in this lighting key there's just one of them, but if I look at the plot up here, this is pink, let's see what else, this is pink, this is pink, this is pink. So that is there's one more here. So there's 5 of them. That is now what we call a system of lights. Okay, so this is a 5-light system of pink front lights. In the lighting key, it was just one single light because we were only lighting one single space. But I determined that I need to have 5 lights to be able to actually light the whole width of the stage in that color. So that's what a system of lights means. I'm going to take something on here like, R368 is a blue from the front, so there's a blue right there, and if I come over here, there's a blue, there's a blue, there's a blue, there's a blue, and there's a blue. This is now a system of blue front lights. Calling it a system doesn't necessarily mean they're all controlled together. It just means that they all have the same purpose. They're all forming a system. They're all, I need all 5 of them to be able to light the whole stage in blue. So they're a system of blue front lights. Okay. Another thing here, you see in my lighting key I have an R83 wash. That's a dark blue. And here is an R83 dark blue. Notice the symbol is different than this, because this one is an ellipsoidal and this one is a par. So for the wash I'm using a par, and for the lighter tinted color I'm using an ellipsoidal. Because with the wash, I don't need to be, the light doesn't need to be as controlled. It's just a color wash for the whole stage. With the lighter tint, I want to be more controlled with the light, so I use an ellipsoidal because I can shutter it, I can sharpen it, I can do a lot more things with it than I could with a par. So you can see from this how I'm going from key to light plot, creating systems of lights. So let's look at something working on over the stage. Okay, here's a lighting key for the study during the day. And again, these are all the lights over the stage, and this is a zoomed in portion of that. You can see I have R316 backlight. Oh, right here, R316 backlight amber. It's part of a strip light. So I'm using the strip lights as backlights. So I have 4 different backlight colors. So 316 is one of those backlight colors in the strip lights. R02 and R63, that's a light amber and a light blue, are side lights, and here they are on the light plot. R63 and R02. And same from the other side. So where is the system of those? Well, there's 2 here, there's 2 here, there's 2 here on these freestanding booms, because we have to light the apron, and there aren't any pipes over the stage for the apron. So basically what we end up with is a system of warm and cool high side lights across the whole stage. So that's what these are. One of each one of these is a light amber and one is a light blue. So those are our high side light systems. And what else do we have here? Study during the day, we've got R55 front light, that's a lavender. Here's study, lavender, R55. And if we look on here, you'll see there's one here, there's one here, and there's one here. So that's a system of front lights for the study. And note that there are only 3 here. On that front of house position, I had a 5 light system of front light. In the study is further upstage, it's not as wide, so I'm only using 3 here. I'm also using a different kind of light. That's a Fresnel, not an ellipsoidal. So I didn't need as much control over the light for the study. I wanted it to be softer. So again, you get an idea how we're going from key to light plot. And I would run into a problem if all my lighting keys were radically different, because I would start to realize that, oh man, my lighting keys are using 5 different side light colors. I don't have enough lights to put 5 lights here, 5 lights there, 5 lights there, so I would run into a problem really quickly. So I need to think about that up front and know that I'm not going to be able to afford to do that, so I know that there has to be similarities between my different lighting keys. They have to rely on some of the same elements to achieve different looks, because I'm creating one lighting plot, not 10 or 15 different lighting plots. Okay, what's next? Okay, beam overlap within a system. Okay, so here we're looking at, say, these are those pink front lights that we were talking about just a minute ago. So our system of 5 pink front lights, and we said that those were ellipsoidals. So we know from section 1 that an ellipsoidal has a particular the light beam has a particular angle when it comes out of the light. And what's nice about VectorWorks is it allows me to visualize those light beams. So what's important here is that the system of 5 lights has to cover the whole stage, but I need to make sure that they overlap appropriately. If they don't overlap enough, then as a person walks across the stage, you're going to see them go in light, out of light, in light, out of light, in, out, in, out, in. You don't want that. You want them to walk across the stage, to walk through 5 lights and have the audience not even realize it. That they just, it'll look like it was one light across the whole stage. But we don't have any lights that can do that can light the whole width of the stage, just one light. We have to use a system of lights, and we have to make sure that they overlap thoroughly. So let's see. And another thing about this, about VectorWorks, is that each one of these symbols has been given a height over the floor, and it's been focused to a focus point. And then I visualize the beams. And let's actually go into VectorWorks, and I'll show you how that works. So if we go to VectorWorks, let's go to a saved view, demo lighting angles. Okay, so now I go to find and modify. I find all my lights whose purpose is amber. Okay, so it selects my 4 lights. I come over here and I tell it to draw the beams. So it draws the beams. I should be able to see. Okay. So then what I can do is I can take my flyover tool, and again we can go into 3D, and if we align these views with each other, we can see how these lights hit the stage in 3D. And we can also look at it, say, from the side. So here we are looking at it from the side, and this is important because now I can also see how far upstage these lights are effective. So a person standing any further upstage than here is going to start to get out of the light, but this light is effective all the way up to about this point right here. So again, VectorWorks is nice because I can look at things from multiple directions very easily. Okay, let's go back to PowerPoint. And the other thing that's nice about these focus points here is that I can then print out a drawing of my focus points, and I'll know exactly where every light needs to be focused to, because I'll have a drawing that all these focus points are right on. So that's it's kind of nice for that as well. Okay, what's next? Are we done with the lighting plot? That's the question. And we are not. So far we've only handled general illumination. We've scaled up the lighting keys into our systems of lights to create that basic image we had for each scene, but that's only general illumination of the acting areas. We need to ask these questions. Do we need to highlight a character at a particular moment in a particular place? Are there practical light sources on stage? We'll talk about what those are in a minute. Are we trying to create any special effects? So we need to give attention to all of those things and factor them into the light plot as well. So first one, backdrops. We didn't have any backdrops in My Fair Lady, mostly due to complicating factors with the scenery. But if we did have a backdrop, these are a couple examples of backdrops that I've used in other shows. We'd have to think about things like the horizontal color variation, or vertical and horizontal color variation. Are we, in what ways are we going to try to put color on the backdrop? And that's important because, what kind of circuits are we going to need to do that? Are we going to need? In this particular image, there are lights on the floor, and there are lights from above. In this image, there are lights only from above. So those kind of things will affect how many circuits you need, and what is actually involved in doing that. And that'll factor into the light plot, because you're going to need more circuits for this than for this, depending on what you're doing. So backdrops are important to consider when you're building the light plot. Specials. These are a couple examples from My Fair Lady. Specials are just exactly what they sound like. A special is a light for a special purpose. So if it's not part of a system, basically, if it's not part of a system that's lighting the whole stage space or an acting area, then you could just think of it as a special. It's something that has a particular purpose. So in this image at the end of My Fair Lady, there's a special on Higgins and there's a special on Eliza. Other specials that I had in the plot for this show, a special for the machines, there was a special on the couch, there was a special on the desk, so a lot of different specials were part of the lighting plot. So you need to think about that ahead of time. Are you going to need a special here or there or wherever? This image down here is the servant choir. The servant choir is in those downstage corners, and I needed to have a special just for this moment in the show, because right here in the middle there's basically kind of a scene change going on. The characters are changing positions in the center, in the dark. So I needed to have specials for this servant choir that were focused very tightly right on the people, right on the actors, so that there'd be very, very little bleeding of light into this center area. So that's one application of specials. Another thing that's important to note is that specials don't have to be obvious. it doesn't have to be this obvious that there's a special here or a special there. It might kind of blend in a little bit with the rest of the lights on stage. But if you took the special out, then it might be obvious what it was doing. Maybe that spot is a little dark or something. So it doesn't have to, a special doesn't have to just stand out. Another thing is, often designers will purposely place specials that they don't know what they're going to use them for. They'll just put them in important positions around the stage, just in case they end up needing one. During a late rehearsal, if the director goes, we need something in this particular spot, it's too dark in this spot or whatever, the designer is just going to go to an unused special and use it for whatever that might be. So specials are, some of them are planned and some of them are just there in case we need one. Okay, next are practicals. Practicals are basically things like this that we put in the scenery. They're light sources in the scenery that kind of suggest where the light should be coming from. So they provide an indication of where the light's supposed to be coming from, or they can help achieve a certain effect. Like this, we put a light inside this smudge pot and recorded a little effect of it flickering, and we used that to achieve this effect of there being fire inside this smudge pot. When we start incorporating practicals, then we start worrying about motivating sources of light and motivated lights. The practical is a motivating source of light, and often what we'll do is we'll put a motivated light to accompany it. So see this light on the floor right here around the base of this lamp? That is not coming from the actual practical, that's coming from a light up here. So it's coming from an actual stage fixture. So the practical is the motivating light, and this is the motivated light. Okay? And you can see why we do that over here. This practical does not put out enough light to light the people who get close to it. Like this actor right here, this practical will not create this effect on his shoulders or around the base of the lamp. So there is a motivated light above it creating that effect. So that's why it's important to establish what practicals you're going to be using, whether you're using them at all, or things like that. You don't have to have the practical, obviously. You might put a motivated light in just to create the effect that something is there that isn't, but it doesn't look as realistic if you're trying to create a realistic effect. And the same thing is going on down here in the study. You can't really see it as well as in this picture up here, but there is a light above this lamp on both of them. So there's a motivating light and a motivated light. Let's see. So yep, that's basically everything about practicals. And like I said, practicals can be to indicate how the scene is being lit. So having these lit suggests that the light of this scene is originating from lamps like this. These lamps, plus maybe ones that you can't see. But obviously we can never rely on that for theater, but we put them there as a suggestion. And we want to light the rest of the scene to, kind of support that suggestion. And we can also, of course, use, like I said, we could use practicals to achieve certain effects. So those are practicals. And they really turned out well, I think, for My Fair Lady in all these examples you see here. Effects. We didn't really have any effects in My Fair Lady except for that smudge pot that I just showed you. We have done some fairly intensive effects shows in the past with Norwich High School, specifically Beauty and the Beast and Little Shop of Horrors. We've used gobos, like here, this is Beauty and the Beast, gobos projected on a scrim, along with, a pretty saturated color. Here's Little Shop of Horrors. We used vine gobos and a saturated green on the house walls for the finale. We've used gobo rotators for Beauty and the Beast, so not only were we projecting a pattern, but we were spinning the pattern for the mirror effects. We used a gobo reel to create the effect of rain. In this scene in Little Shop of Horrors, we used 3 intelligent fixtures, moving mirrors, high-end techno beams they are called, and created this rock and roll effect for the song Feed Me using a haze machine. The reason you can see these beams is because we're using a haze machine. And I'll tell you, adding intelligent fixtures to a show just can double the programming time. It took an entire day to record the moving light effects for this one song. So intelligent lights can be really cool, but especially if you don't have a lot of support in programming them, a lot of tech help, they can take a lot of time to program. Another thing about effects is, this was the end of Beauty and the Beast. You have to the reason why you have to think about effects when you're doing the light plot is you're going to have to put something in the light plot to achieve the effects that you're trying to create. So like this at the end of Beauty and the Beast, when the transformation takes place, what are you going to do to distract the audience's attention at that moment? What are you going to do to create that fantastic point in the show where everything's spinning and the transformation is about to take place? What are you going to do that? And you've got to incorporate that in the light plot. For this show, we used a star ball, a rotating star ball to project stars in the house, and we used lights facing the audience in different colors, strobing and pulsing and things like that. So that all has to be taken, you have to consider that, and you have to include it in the light plot. So just more things that you need to think about when you're building the light plot. So here is the finished light plot. It's finished in quotes because revisions are always being made pretty much until the show opens, either until dress rehearsals start or the show opens, depending on how your show is going. So the lighting plot is basically, it's a foundation for going into the theater, but it's not set in stone. It changes. This light plot changed quite a bit in the week that we were setting up the lighting in for My Fair Lady. Things were repurposed, some lights were moved a little bit, things like that. So let me just show you all the stuff we just talked about, how that factored into the light plot. Specials, let's see, this is a special, this is a special, that's a special, specials. What else do we have here? This is a motivated light. This is a motivated light. This is a motivated light. Motivated light. Again, effects, we didn't really have much except for that this one right here for the smudge pot. But you can see how much of the plot is, comes from those things, those specials, motivated lights, practicals, effects. No backdrops, but there would have been even more if we had used a backdrop. So, like I said, this is the finished lighting plot, but this is still not technically a lighting plot. It's closer to a lighting plot, but it's still not technically a lighting plot. And why? Because one fundamental thing, this doesn't show the position of the lights relative to the scenery. No scenery is shown on here. It's just all the lighting positions kind of crunched together, and this is actually called a hanging plot. It does have the elements a lighting plot needs. It has annotations, it has title block, scale, it has the legend and everything, but it's still not what you would actually call a lighting plot. It's a hanging plot because it shows us where the lights need to hang. But for My Fair Lady, it was more practical to do this hanging plot because we just need to get in there and we need to get the lights hung quickly. I was being an electrician and the designer, so it was just more practical for our show to do this for the lighting plot and not show all the scenery on here. It just wasn't necessary. So it is a lighting plot, but technically it's a hanging plot. Okay, so we've got the lighting plot, but now we need the rest of the paperwork. We need that instrument schedule, right? So again, we can create the instrument schedule by hand. We can draw out a spreadsheet by hand, or we can use software, lighting spreadsheet, and paperwork software to do it. So VectorWorks actually has functions in it to do paperwork, but they're not really that great. So what we're going to do is, or what I did was export all the instrument data from VectorWorks into this program called Lightwright. And Lightwright is the software of choice for Broadway, basically. So let me take you over to Lightwright, and we'll see what Lightwright looks like. So this is Lightwright. It's just a spreadsheet program specifically for lighting. So here I'm looking at my master spreadsheet, and all these lines are different lights, and you can see, it has all the data in here. And I imported that data initially from VectorWorks, maybe filled in some more information in here, exported it back to VectorWorks, brought it back from VectorWorks back and forth as necessary. But this is my spreadsheet with all my information in it, and I can sort it, according to different whatever I want to look at. And the nice thing, the reason that we're using Lightwright and that Broadway designers use Lightwright is because it very, very quickly produces your paperwork. So here's our instrument schedule for My Fair Lady. It shows the position, unit number, everything. It just takes all that data and sorts it the way we want it to be sorted. And again, like I mentioned when we first talked about paperwork, if we sort it by something else, like channel numbers, then we call that a channel hookup. If we sort it by dimmers, it's a dimmer hookup. If we sort it by, color, it's a color schedule. So these are all the lights without color, and then it would show, all the lights with this color, all the lights with this color. So we can sort it a lot of different ways. So that's Lightwright. Just really powerful for producing that paperwork. So back to PowerPoint. Okay. Let's see here. So the next thing I had here was the instrument schedule. We just looked at that in Lightwright, so we don't need to see that. Channel hookup, again, just looked at that in Lightwright. Generally, these are the two that we really need to have when we're going into the theater. Instrument schedule is number one, but it's always good to have it sorted by channels as well, because when we focus lights, we'll need to have a channel hookup. So okay, we've got that, and the last thing that's especially nice about Lightwright is Lightwright produces inventory reports very quickly. So an inventory report summarizes the equipment and consumables that are needed for the show. Equipment are things like cables, lights, things like that. Consumables are things that are going to be, eventually you're going to have to throw it out. So like tape or gels, color filters wear out, so that's considered consumable. So here is a color count that I created with Lightwright. So this summarizes all the sheets of gel that we needed for My Fair Lady. And so lots of sheets of gel. I don't know how many it said here. 51 sheets of gel we had to buy, about $6 a piece. So we're talking about $300 in gel roughly right there. So what I did was, for budget's sake, I went through and said, okay, I don't really need that many of this. I can, I have some of this already. I have some of that already. I don't really need this color. I'll just use something we already have. It'll be close. It won't be exact, but whatever. So I came up with this revised list, only 37 sheets. So we decrease the cost as much as possible. And then you order, we order the equipment and the consumables we need from a company like BMI Supply. They're a theatrical supplier. You can also, if you need lights or cables and you don't want to buy, you can rent. So for our production of Beauty and the Beast, we rented some lights and some cable and a few other things for that show. So generally, you'll have to go to a different company, but it just depends on who you're working with. So you have to order what you need or rent what you need, but you have to make sure that you're going to have what you need to put on the show. So let's see. We are through the process. We've gone through the entire process of creating that image in our head, creating the lighting keys, thinking about all the constraints involved, and producing the light plot. And then we went from the light plot to the rest of our paperwork, and then we had to assess whether we had everything we needed. Do we need to order some gel, do whatever. So that's the whole process that we went through. So now at this point, we have everything that we need to go into the theater and put the lighting together. So that's what we're going to do in the next section.